Leaky gut syndrome is a glib description, but that's the kind of the generic word that's being used now to describe what technically is a small intestine colitis that is iatrogenic. It's due to interventions from Western medicines, mostly antibiotics and vaccinations is usually how it starts. So it's a modern problem. It's not recognized very much in conventional Western medicine, although it was discovered, promoted, and taught a lot by people in what's called functional medicine. Functional medicine is kind of a coalition of doctors that are medical doctors, naturopaths, chiropractors, and some acupuncturists. Functional medicine relies on Western testing, on Western physiology, but their methods for treatment are not pharmaceutical or surgical. If the naturopaths are doing it and the holistic medical doctors, they tend to use nutritional supplements. And I'm one of the few people that's recommending treating it with Chinese herbal medicine. And most of the people I teach, or all the people I teach, are acupuncturists who are trained in herbal medicine. So it's really an herbal medicine solution to a problem that's defined in Western physiology, in terms of Western scientific medicine. And I lecture a lot about this. I must have been lecturing on this subject 20 years now, and my basic information, even from 20 years ago, it's still valid today. I've gotten better on clinically, how I take it. A lot of cases now, people will say, well, I have leaky gut syndrome. And when I do the lab tests, I say, well, I don't think you have leaky gut syndrome, but you do have you do have different problems that the labs will help direct us to how to treat it. So what works here is the fact that we use laboratories. We use laboratories to figure out the degree and what kind of problems people have. You will not be able to discern a lot of this by traditional Chinese methods of pulse and tongue. It's just you'll be lost. And it's not that pulses and tongues aren't relevant, but if you don't target some key aspects, which are, one, the microbes that might be involved, like candida or bad bacteria, and two, if there's inflammation or not, which I think can only be told by laboratories, and three, food allergies. So in leaky gut, the two big players are either microbes, pathogenic microbes, or food allergens. And so it's real important to use labs to test for these. The exception is New York State, which is very regulated with the labs, and the labs that I use are not recognized in New York State. So people in New York State, what they do if they're interested in these labs is they actually will get a mailing address out of New Jersey or Connecticut in order to send out and receive the reports. That's a New York State law that all the labs have to be certified by the state of New York, and these labs that I use are in Seattle, Washington, and they just don't want to go through the process of getting certified by the state of New York. The other labs, of course, is North Carolina, Geneva Labs. We'll talk about that lab also. So leaky gut, I want to just give an overview of what it is. It's an inflammatory condition of the small intestine that usually is started after antibiotics. When you get a dysbiosis, and now you'll have colonies of candida or bad bacteria that will actually injure the epithelium of the small intestine. And this will bring down the immune defenses and allow an infiltration of substances that should not be absorbed. These include undigested foods, these include bacteria themselves that are absorbed, viruses that are absorbed, and a lot of toxins. Toxins meant for excretion get absorbed, and then there's a cascade effect. The first thing that happens is the liver gets overwhelmed trying to detoxify all these new substances. And that toxicity will extend and cause a number of problems. such as migraine headaches. I think most 80% of migraine headaches, if they're not due to head injury, are probably due to leaky gut syndrome. Fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, I'd say probably 80% of those are due to leaky gut syndrome. Where even if chronic fatigue or the fibromyalgia is due to viruses, the viruses have been absorbed and you're getting your reactions due to the virus, but it would not have happened if the small intestine had its integrity. The other conditions that it causes is eczema. I would say that 100% of pediatric eczema is due to leaky gut syndrome. Not psoriasis, which is its own thing. Psoriasis has a different glue. And there are a lot of problems that people think are leaky gut syndrome that when we do the lab testing aren't. These might include irritable bowel syndrome. They definitely include a lot of the autoimmune diseases like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. These are usually not leaky gut cases. But any chronic problem can be compounded by leaky gut syndrome because two things. One, it's very common leaky gut because it follows antibiotics. There's so much antibiotics in the food chain and in the water, let alone medically prescribed, that a lot of people are set up for this condition. And so you might get it from a lot of chronic conditions will have leaky gut as a background. For example, multiple sclerosis case came to me and she said, "Can you do anything for multiple sclerosis?" And I said, "Well, not really." I said, "But we look for any stressors that may be affecting your immune system." And when we did a leaky gut assessment on her, she had terrible markers for leaky gut. So in any condition, you want to see if there's these other stressors and to take them off so the body can heal itself. The main problem with leaky gut is it really brings down the immune system. And when the immune system goes down, the adrenals will get exhausted trying to deal with it, and this leads to a lot of problems. So the point of the story is you never know who has it and who doesn't without doing the lab testing. Now, the lab testing is not particularly expensive. Most patients who have chronic problems, it's not an issue. To my patients, the general panel we do through the stool is between $175 to $200, their price. If we do a blood test analysis for food allergens, the lab that I use that I really recommend, to the patient's price is around $200. So I don't do both tests at once because the first test, the stool test, will give me a pretty good idea if they have food allergies or not. It just won't identify the food allergies. But if the first test shows they probably have food allergies, then we go on to do the second test, which is the food allergies. And it's important to do the food allergy test. A lot of people are convinced they're allergic to foods when they really aren't. The problem is not an allergy. An allergy to a food is an inflammatory reaction. And so we have a marker that looks for inflammation. If there's not an inflammatory marker, there probably isn't food allergies. And when we do the food allergy test, they don't have it. And they say, well, I'm convinced I'm allergic to dairy or I'm convinced I'm allergic to gluten. But the real problem is not that they're allergic to those foods, that there's allergies means that there's antigens that are floating around specific to that food. And non-allergy, you won't have those antigens. And what the blood test does is it looks for those antigens and antibodies. But what they have is very poor digestion. And so they're not able to digest the foods completely. And they'll be uncomfortable. So the difference between a poor digestive food problem and an allergy is a poor digestive food problem is not destructive to the body. It's not harmful to the body. It's uncomfortable. You have bloating, you have loose stools, you might even have headache, but it's non-inflammatory. A real food allergy is inflammatory and has a lot of consequences because of that inflammation. And when I test, actually what I found over the years is there's less food allergies out there than you think. When people pendulum and muscle test and Whole Foods, oh, you're allergic to this, and you're allergic to that, it's probably not an allergy. It just could be an inability to digest the food, which is not really an inflammatory reaction. So So they're treated differently. They're treated differently. I mean, food allergies, if they're real, you've got to get off the foods while you heal the guts. Does anybody here do NAET or Bioset? These are treatments to clear allergies, and these people, what they try to do is clear the antibodies out of the system. And NAET especially will say, well, we cleared it and you can eat those foods tomorrow. 24 hours you can eat these foods, which is absolutely not the case. The guts need to heal, and it can take at least 2 months to heal the guts. So any real food allergies you have to keep off for at least 2 months, and sometimes 9 months. Some food allergies are so stubborn, it takes a very long time. Even with NAT or Bioset clearance, it can be very stubborn. Ultimately, you say to the patient, whatever bothers you as a food, don't eat it. Just don't eat it. Stay away from it. Whether it's an allergy or someone says, I eat tomatoes and my skin itches, or I eat